What's up, guys? All right, so I've gotten a lot of feedback, or I got a lot of questions, and a lot of people have asked me, how did you become the Christian that you are now? Like, how did you become so close to God? And everyone has their own testimony. Everyone has their own story as to what brought them to God. For me, I went through a series of things, two major things really, that drew me close to the Lord, and gonna go ahead and actually just tell you about him. I grew up in a ministerial family. At the time, my grandfather was a pastor, my dad was a co-pastor, so my whole family was at the top of the food chain, so to speak, in the church area. While it sounds great and it sounds cool and all that, but as kids, as being PKs, it was rough sometimes because we were always under the spotlight. I really couldn't do much. I mean, I would still run outside the church, or I'd still would get in trouble, and there were times where when I did get in trouble, my grandfather would make me pray during the sermon, like at the altar. So it was an interesting life growing up in a ministerial family. But even though I grew up in that environment, I never actually knew God. I believed in Him, and I heard, I read the Bible stories, and I said, wow, that's great and everything. But to me, they were just stories. They didn't mean anything to me yet because I was still young. I didn't go through anything yet. But time went by, and I started growing up, and I was still in the church and everything. And then during my middle school years, I went through a trial. Not me personally, but my sister at the time, she was going through something as well, and she went through a phase where she wanted to do her own thing. And she left the church, she left the house, and so that was a wake-up call for me and my family, because it taught us that just because you're in a ministerial family, that doesn't mean that you can't go through anything, that that you don't get trials. No, it woke us up, so to speak. So it brought me closer to the Lord in that aspect, because I started praying more. I started praying that God would deal with her, let her learn her lesson, but at the same time, keep her from harm. And so I really got to know the Lord. And after what felt like forever, towards the end of the summer, she came back. Thank God. She came back and she learned her lesson, and now she's one of the strongest young women that I know. There's not any other woman that I know that, I mean, you can bring up a question and she can just answer it with the verse. Like, she's just so intelligent when it comes to the word, and that pleases me. That makes me so happy, because who she was before and who she is now, I mean, it amazes me how God just changes people, and it really, to this day, it's such a blessing. We don't necessarily look back on it, but we do remember what happened. And my sister still thanks God every day that she goes through that. If you want to ask her more about that, or because I know that what she went through, a lot of you guys maybe are going through or have went through. And so, I'll leave her username at the bottom if you want to, message her on Instagram and, just talk to her and ask for advice. And she's a great young lady. Shout out to my sister. While that experience was great and I learned a lot from it, it wasn't enough. And I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but it wasn't enough for me to say, well, I know God, or I have a relationship with him now. No, it was just the start. In the beginning of my freshman year, I had reconnected with an old friend of mine when my family and I used to live in Boise, Idaho, Nampa, Idaho. I had reconnected with a friend of mine, and her and I, we don't remember each other much, but we grew up with each other for the most part. I mean, I left when I was 5, so I vaguely remember her. But I do remember that when I reconnected with her, I You know, as the saying goes, love at first sight, and that's what happened. You know, I saw her and I said, wow, like I was like, Lord, you did good. um, but you know, we reconnected, we started talking, and time went by, and we met each other. We went back. My family and I went to Idaho to visit my grandparents, but we also met with their family. And our families were tight, you know, and we still are. You know, we're really close because we kind of went to church together. We hung out at the church together, you know, back in the old days. But I was nervous when we first met. You know, I really didn't talk to her. I was just so nervous. I didn't want to be a dork or anything, so I was like, I'm just gonna be on my phone, and you know. And back then, I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have iPhones weren't around yet. It was, you know, I had a slider, you know, pretty ghetto, whatever. But yeah. So I was on my phone the whole time, and so I really didn't talk to her much. But it wasn't until we flew back that I realized I was like, you know, I really like this girl. I really like her, you know. And plus, her dad was the role model of me getting into drums. He was the reasoning of why I got into drums. So that was kind of a plus for me. But finally, I get a lot of not negativity. I get a lot from this because they say, well, you didn't ask her out in person. You didn't ask her over Skype. I didn't know about Skype. One. Two, I couldn't really ask her out in person because I'm all the way in Virginia. She's in Idaho, across the country. It doesn't work that way. So I texted her and I said, look, I really like you, and, you know, I said, will you be my girlfriend? And she said yes, you know, but I wanted to do it right. You know, this is my first relationship ever, and I wanted to do it right. And so I said, I want to talk to your parents. You know, let's get our parents and your parents, just get on Skype and let's talk, you know, work things out. And so we talked, and our parents agreed to help each other out because, let's face it, long distance is not easy. And that's what I learned. I started learning that. But during the time that I was dating her, I really had to study her. And that's what my dad had told me. He said, you know, study her. Like, she's an experiment, you know, learn about her, you know, find out what makes her mad or what makes her happy, you know, all those little details, you know. And so it was interesting, you know. I would actually just sit there like this and just observe her, you know, and watch what she does and everything. And so, you know, time went by, you know, and this was, I believe, I would want to say this is probably maybe our sophomore year, I believe. But things started getting rough, at least for her, because again, women need that touch. And as much as, you know, for me, it was like, I don't care, as long as you're mine, I don't really care. I mean, I do care, but I don't care. But women love the touch, and she wasn't getting that. So it got rough for her. She broke up for the first time with me. She said it's getting hard and everything. And I was like, I was hurt, but at the same time, I was understanding. I said, okay, fine. But a couple months went by, and this was around September when she had broken up with me. And so then I was like, okay, you know, but she kept hinting things about me that she missed. And I'm just like, look, I'm not going to ask you out because you broke up with me. So, and I finally asked her, I said, what are you asking me? So she asked for a second chance. And I said, okay, I'll give you the second chance. But I had a surprise for her because I told her we're actually going out back to Idaho to visit my grandparents for like Christmas. So she was excited. I was excited. We met in December, and for the first time, we actually met each other, but in a relationship. And memories were made, hugs and kisses were exchanged, you know, all that. And while, yeah, it was hard when we left, or when I left to go back, we had something, at least we had memories to remember. And, you know, it was a growing process for both of us. For me, I was like, you know, I really, you know, I really figured out that this is what I want. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking about marriage, but at the same time, I knew she's the only one that I want to be with. Like, there's no other girl I want to be with. So, but I still felt like there was something missing. Like there was something in here, even though I was in a relationship, even though I had the most beautiful girl ever, something was still missing until finally I realized I needed Christ in my life. Because I said, Lord, if I want this relationship to succeed, I'm going to need your help. I can't do this on my own. And he's like, then give your life to me. It was on December 31st, so it was kind of cool. We had a service that led into the New Year's Eve. So I said, I want to get baptized. And, you know, my grandfather counseled me. You know, he asked me why and everything. And I told him that I needed Christ in my life. You know, I can't be living the way that I am right now because it's not going to last. It's not going to help me in any way. And I said, I need him. So my grandfather said, okay. So I gave my life to the Lord, and then a couple months later, I received the Holy Spirit. So everything was falling into place, and I was like, great. You know, I got, you know, at that time I had a pretty decent job. And I said, I got a girlfriend, I got the Lord, you know, geez, you know, everything. I felt like I was on cloud nine.